It also will get you, it's a good form to have if you had a buyer, you're working with them and somebody else grabs them and writes the offer on the house that you had just shown them and we're gonna write an offer with, and you are disputing that and claiming that you were the person that they should have. And it's rare that that happens. Most times it's like, whatever. But if it does happen, if you don't have an agency agreement, you don't have a chance. It's not gonna happen.
Is there a way to make it for all addresses, or do you have to get this signed for every single address?
For each address, yeah, I know. And it's a tough call to which way you go there. You know, you can pre-sign it and then TBA the address, and that's permissible. If you pre-sign for assistance and TBA the address, you know, sometimes when you're working with buyers, that is preferable. But I agree, it always is cumbersome that you don't have an address specifically, you know, but you are offering assistance when you're talking about loans, how much they can afford, how much money they owe, what are their circumstances, why are they buying now, or why are they selling now? All of those things are things that are, quote, specific assistance that you should have explained, at the minimum, explained how agency works, how you work with them in an agency role. And buyers, it's a great thing, and this works for sellers too. When you're talking about agency, if the first thing you do is start to talk with them about loans and amounts and those kinds of things, and you know, you'll be just like most every other agent that they've talked to. If you tell them, hey, I want to ask you some questions and get some things so I can help you. This can even be at an open house, but I need to explain to you how agency works prior to us doing that. And this may be the first time that you've heard this, and more than likely it will be, and they'll gain a lot of respect for you because you are then talking to them about agency, respecting their information and explaining the process so they know what's going on. So it will close on your buyer or seller right out of the chute, that you care enough about them to explain what agency is about, how it works, and all that kind of stuff. Whoop. Yes, there's nothing to mirror. So, so with buyer-appointed agency, anybody like super comfortable knows exactly what this says and why? Okay. In buyer-appointed agency, there's some things, and when you go through it, you talk about if a concept agent writes your purchase agreement or offered a lease, and it describes the agency relationship between people, then there are certain duties of an appointed agent to the buyer, and then as an agent in general, you have duties to all people involved in the transaction. See, contrary to what some agents believe, you can't just lie to people, okay? It's not good. So that's one of the things it says is that you have to be honest. So if somebody asks you a question and you know the answer, absent it being personal information about your buyer, you need to share that. So if they say, hey, are you aware of any like water that's been in the basement or anything? And if you know it, you need to be telling. You need to be shuffling that information out right away. Whether your seller says, don't do that, you know, when you're showing a buyer, don't do that, that you cannot follow that guideline. It goes against your licensing, okay? So the first part is a description of agency, an appointed agency specifically, which is what we follow in the Doing area. There are agencies called single agency and dual agency, and so there's different kinds. We speak to appointed agency, and that's when the broker of your company individually appoints you to represent a specific client. And by doing it that way, we don't have, especially in larger companies, you don't have the deal that they do in some small towns where if you're listed in an office of a company, you are then, every agent in there has to be a dual agent. We don't have to follow those guidelines because we're so large. And the most of the companies in the Des Moines market have adhered to that we do appointed agency, so that like me as a broker, I could appoint one agent to be the seller's agent, one agent to be the buyer's agent, and those people can work autonomously from each other and work toward their client's best interest. So that's the idea behind appointed agency. On the second page, it describes specifically that who's going to be the appointed agent. It talks about the agent's duties, which are on the front side. The dual agency disclosure, which says that you're telling them that there's a possibility, there could be a scenario where you are a dual agent, where you're out looking at properties, you list one that fits the criteria for that buyer, and so you're then going to show them that property, and the way to do that is to be a dual agent. And we'll talk about dual agency just a little bit. Is it in the file?
Yep, it's the next one.
Next one, okay, cool. So there's a possibility of separate representation. So, you know, like if I'm working with a buyer and they're interested in 900 East 8th, and I have another buyer and they say, hey, we saw this place 900 East 8th, we want to look at it. I'm not precluded from working with both of those people. I'm precluded from discussing that with either one of them. I'm precluded from giving information across about that buyer to that buyer. I can't do that. So I don't gain knowledge to present to either buyer by being in an association with another one, okay? Then compensation and cooperation. Typically you get paid through cooperation compensation from the listing broker. That's the standard scenario, the way it goes most of the times. We have paperwork if you're going to work in a different scenario, if you're going to be an exclusive representation of that buyer, and that they're going to promise to pay you in all situations, whether it be a for sale by owner, a next generation, whatever. They didn't say they're going to be the ones paying you. Now, it doesn't mean that they have to be the ones coming up with the money when you do that. It could be that the money is being supplied by the listing company, or the money may be split between the buyer and the seller. So it doesn't say where the money has to come from, but it does say that the end game, they're going to be responsible for that payment. And you agree to a percentage of payment that they're comfortable with. And then you try to get as much of that in the transaction. Typically, you try to get as much of that from the other side of the transaction, from the listed property or the for sale by owner or the next generation or whatever.
That's a different form, isn't it?
What's that?
The agreeing on that's the buyer broker form. So if somebody signs the agency form, they're not obligated to use you, like they're not
No,
under
I'm talking
contract
about
with you.
the exclusive buyer agency. So it's a different form, yes.
I see. So my friend at another brokerage who says, oh yeah, I haven't signed the agency form, and thinks that they're under contract with her, that's probably true.
It depends on what form they sign. You know, if they do an exclusive buyer's agency form, then it may be, that's actually a contract with the buyer, similar to the contract with the seller.
Okay.
So it'd be that same thing.
Okay.
This is a disclosure, not a contract. Although it does promise back and forth, it does give promise, but it doesn't make it, it doesn't lock it in. The signature doesn't lock it in. You literally can have a phone call from that buyer that says, you know what, we're going to work with somebody else, and you'd be like, okay, good luck, you know. because all you need to be is informed, and it can be just about anything that informs you that that's the case. So it doesn't hold up for one agent to another. This doesn't hold up much. You know, you have to go to the next level to get there.
Thank you.
And I think it's worth talking to the client about it a little bit to let them know that it's not that exclusive agency form that our friend uses, so that they do feel more comfortable using it. It does tie them in anytime, of course, they sign something, they feel more obligated to you. But I always like to let them know if, you know, if this doesn't work out for either one of us, just do me the courtesy, call me to break up with me, and don't just ghost me, but do me the courtesy of giving me a call if you want to work with somebody else. And it just kind of puts it out there. You were going to ask, Nora?
I was just curious how many people in here use exclusive fire agencies or not, just because at another brokerage, maybe, that's a big thing, they push.
It is.
Always sign an exclusive, always sign an exclusive.
Yeah. I don't mind exclusive, you know. The thing I mind is the people that have them signed because they don't intend to service the client well. And that is unfortunate, and it does happen, where as soon as they sign, it's like the person that lists the property for 6 months and goes, man, I hope somebody brings an offer, and that's their marketing program. Okay, so same kind of thing with a buyer. When they sign exclusive buyer representation, then you are bound to provide them with specific services. You're bound to search and look and find and do everything you can. And those are the people you're on the for sale by owner, you're on Zillow, you're everywhere trying to find a property for them to get something that might work for them. That's your obligation to them. Is you're going to turn over every stone. Sometimes the thought process in getting that signed is I'm going to make sure they can't go anywhere else. And that's the only thought process. So both of them are promises to one another. The exclusive buyer agency is when you're making a very sincere promise to that buyer to do everything you can for them, everything, you know, to hold their hand through the process, just that whole finding and working and, you know, it's the call when you're represented in that way and they call you and want to see a property, you need to go show it, period. You need to go do it. I know you have personal lives and stuff, and there's always circumstances and exemptions to that. But basically, when you make that kind of a promise, you need to live up to it. Just the way you expect them to live up to it, where they go out, they're driving around, they happen to drive by a house, they see a for sale by owner, they pull in the driveway, it happens to be open, or the guy's in the driveway watering his yard. Come on in, let's look at this, you know. And they do that whole process and they're open to it because you haven't told them different. And they decide, oh my God, we love this house, we're gonna do it. And then they go, oh, we have an agent. What's the seller gonna say at that point? Oh, I don't work with agents. Of course they're gonna say that. They know it costs money, you know? So then that it gets implemented and they cut themselves off of getting money from that seller. So you just have to work hard. Sorry, I got off on a tangent on that because it's frustrating because I hear that people are like, I haven't heard from them for 3 months, but I'm signed for 2 more months on the contract. By the way, just so you know, if the agent is not living up to their promises, if they have not talked to them periodically over that period of time, it's highly unlikely that they can make that step. So, okay. I'll give you a quick brief description of my mindset and how I look at agency. When I'm talking to people, I'm like, listen, when we work together and I make this promise to you, here's what I do. I take you and I hold you over me and everybody else in the transaction, my company, everything. I hold you above all. You are the most important in the transaction. And that's how it works. I service you at that level, okay? If we go into a dual agency, then my explanation simply is like, you know what? I've put you up here. And now I've taken another person, a listing, and I've put you up here. and the two people are at that level. And I can't hold one above the other. I can't serve one against the other, okay? I can't work for one harder than I work for the other. That's what you're on an even level playing field. And at that thing, when you're doing dual agency, what people need to understand, you gain no more knowledge when you're working as a dual agent, okay? What I know about the seller is not available to the buyer. What I know about the buyer is not available to the seller. The only advantage it gives me as an agent is that I have the opportunity to understand the end goals of both parties. And sometimes I can find a way through there where I'm like, well, I know they're wanting to do this and these people are thinking about that. Maybe if we did this, we could work through those roadblocks and get something put together for both of them, okay? So that's the idea of appointed agency and then dual agency added on. Is there questions just about the appointed agency? Anything you need to add?
The only other thing on here is, I always think it's interesting, but the last, at least on the first page, that's just the disclosure of agency, and then the second page is the actual agreement of agency. But do you notice that it says on the first page, the undersigned acknowledges receipt of a copy of this agency disclosure document before any specific assistance was provided by the broker or its affiliated sales personnel. I think we miss that a lot of times. It is toasty in here.
I'm sorry.
We miss.
Get out, sorry.
We really do miss that. And we talked in the buyer's class that this is a great form to get signed ahead of time because we are providing that value. And even if they're not going to sign the agreement of basically of representation on the second page, have them sign the first page that just says, I explained this to you. And then that gets them started.
Yeah, I've never done that broke down, but it would work where you're at least now at this point, you know that I have, this is how agency works. We haven't entered into it, but you know how it works. So you know that information you tell me could be, let's see, without entered into and being a broker and being appointed as their agent, then the things they talk about aren't protected at that point. So that's where I go to the second page and say, I want to help. Here's the best way I can do it. Okay. So dual agency, here's the thing. People get all wound up about dual agency. Let me explain something to you. It is just two appointed agencies running simultaneously. There is no advantage to one party or the other. There is an advantage to the agent in that you get paid more. And I tell them up front, I love dual agency. I get paid more. And oh, by the way, I'm a bit of a control freak. So it gives me the opportunity to work both sides and make it all work and everybody be happy. And then our back office has both sides and they get to do all of that stuff and make everybody happy. So it's wonderful. But there's no advantage gained. Okay, there's no advantage gained. If you get to a point where you have a buyer who just wants to be that buyer, that just wants to beat everybody up, that's like, that kind of thing, and needs you to do things that you're uncomfortable doing because you have the listing too, then refer the buyer. Just refer them away. Get them to another agent in your office, your company, or whatever. Refer them out so that they can be represented the way they want to be represented, which is harsh. And everybody's had one of those where they're just mean, and I don't like working with them anyway when they're like that. I like win-wins. That's always my goal, is to get to a win-win. But if they're like that, refer them away. They're not going to be able to be comfortable in that representation. But things like, as a buyer, and I'm looking at your listing, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, what about the price and things like that? Say, hey, why don't I do this? I don't mind. Remember those words. Why don't I do this? I don't mind. People really like those words. Why don't I do this? I don't mind. Let me put together a market analysis for you, the same way that I did for the sellers. And I'll show you what's on the market, what's been out there, pricing, when it was sold, those amenity things, and you literally do a market analysis for the buyer. If you can't do that, there's a problem. Okay? Because that's open, that's straight up, here's what the facts say. And if you have a listing that's 30,000 overpriced, it's gonna show it. In that case, you might want to refer the buyer to, because it's gonna be uncomfortable. All right? Questions on dual agency? It's just, I don't want to make light of it, but it's not highly complicated. It's honesty. It's honesty, okay? You've already promised not to lie, yes, ma'am?
Do you always refer the buyer if you have somebody that doesn't want dual agency, or do you refer the client that you've worked with less time, or?
Well, typically in dual agency, I've already got the listing.
So that's
So
why you do.
that's why
buyer.
normally I'd probably, because I've already got the relationship established and that kind of thing, you know? I mean, I'm sure another agent would be like, sure, I'll take a listing, you know? But typically you're gonna refer the buyer off and ask for somebody, and you can, you know, whatever level they're at, you know, you can refer them off at a small referral fee. You say, hey, I'm gonna give this to you, you write it up, we get it put together, it's 50-50. However you wanna work it, it doesn't matter. The compensation doesn't matter to the representation. They're not connected. Okay? All right. Any other questions about agency, wondering about it? What about this? How about that? No?
I was thinking I didn't change the format here though.
Oh, yes, I have not been keeping up.
That's okay. I'm in the wrong spot.
So, purchase agreement. Purchase agreement. Let me start off with a couple of general statements about the purchase agreement. If you are not at the level where you can sit down across from somebody and turn the purchase agreement upside down, talk with them about what's in it, what it means, and each section, visit with them in a brief version of what that section means to them and in the transaction. If you're not there, you need to work. You need to work on being able to do that. If you don't understand this document well enough to turn it around and say what's in it, you're not ready. I'm just being frank with everybody. You're just not ready. You have to be at that level. If you're not, practice. Get your kids or your spouse or your friend or somebody like that and start presenting. And how do you know what it says? Read it. Do you realize there are agents that don't read the purchase agreement?
I love working with them.
Yes, because usually they end up on the short end when they work with Heather. Because they don't understand what's going on.
Oh, did you read the book?
Yeah, exciting thing, I think, for me, is that I saw the first version of the DMAR approved purchase agreement the other day. So we would have one purchase agreement across DMAR. It would be the same purchase agreement. And then it would have addendums for each different company about changes to it and that kind of thing. I'm so excited because I feel terrible for agents that are newer in the business that are trying to do things. And there's as many as 140 different versions of purchase agreements right out there right now. Because every single company gets to make a change if they want, or create if they want.
Will that be mandatory for them to use?
We can't make it mandatory. I wish we could.
So there will be 141 versions.
Well, maybe. It is being drawn up by all of the major companies in the MLS. That's who's working on it.
Okay.
So it is working towards having the representation of the larger companies, just to cover as many agents as possible, and then to addendum out of any issues, fees, maybe some earnest money issues, some of those kinds of things that differ. That'll be on an addendum, but at least it puts you on notice that there is an addendum, and hopefully agents will read that, So
And other boards already have this. Cedar Rapids, they all use the board
Cedar
form.
Rapids,
Does Iowa
Ames.
City? Ames does.
Ames, Iowa City does. Phoenix uses the same purchase agreement. Because I had people go, I don't know if we can get everybody to agree. And I'm like, are you kidding? There are 50,000 agents in Phoenix, and they agree.
When is this, do you think, gonna come out?
They're trying to get the purchase agreement, and I believe the subject to sale agreement done by the first of the year. That's the goal of that. And then to work on from there for different forms that they want to generalize. And just to age myself, when I started, that's how it was. Everybody had the same purchase agreement. And so you studied the hell out of it. That's the other advantage of knowing your own purchase agreement super well, is when you do read another one, you'll recognize things right away. You're like, ooh. One thing that we had an agent get caught on the other day was that Precision changed their closing structure. And their purchase agreement, I think it's the only one I'm aware of anyway, it says on or before. It doesn't say on or about like virtually every other purchase agreement in our market does. It says on or before, slid right past the agent. And then, it was like, well, I need to try to get this date worked out, because the people on the other end were buying a house and it was two older people that were going into a nursing home, and none of that was set up. They were trying to get that all together, and they finally got it set up, but it was going to be about 2 weeks longer than the purchase agreement said. So the agent goes back to the owner and says, hey, we got to work something out because that, and they're like, no, it says November 1st. That's what it says, period. It was quite the battle. Quite the battle. If I heard about it, it's quite the battle, because I don't get involved in them unless they get rough. So, the purchase agreement, a couple of things. One, in a purchase agreement, there are blanks. When you're done with it and you're presenting it for signature, there should not be. I don't care if you put a line through the space that doesn't have anything to do with your clients. You have addressed that blank. If it's blank and you haven't done anything with it, it's just blank. It leaves to the imagination. Is there an issue? Is there something? Should that have been there? Was something supposed to go in that space? So even if it doesn't have anything to do with you, put a line on it, okay? So that they know, yes, we know that's blank. We know we're not using that. It doesn't matter. It's not part of the purchase agreement. So fill in those. And when you do, we'll go, have I got a good amount of time?
We go till 3:00.
Okay. So in the purchase agreement, there's some things. There's what we call contingencies or subject tos or whatever. But it's things that if they happen, it will move forward. And if they don't, it will be canceled. And the first one of those is financing. And the financing contingency gets kind of messed up. I'm hoping that the new one will have better than what we have at this point. Because here's what we're doing is we're asking people upon presentation of an offer to take their property off the market, and our financing paper isn't an approval. It's not even a pre-approval. Okay, it's a pre-qualification. It's like, well, they told me a bunch of stuff, and based on what they told me, I could get them a loan. That's it. That's all there is to it. They haven't checked credit reports. They haven't, seen if they actually have a job. They don't know how much money they make. They don't know what their credit's like. Nothing. So I'm in favor of the 2 level where you at least have the pre-qual, and then you have a date set for pre-approval, and then the final one that is final approval. My preference is it goes that way so that you follow the steps along in there and you have some teeth in that. We'll see how that comes through. But in there, it does some things. And when you agree to a price, well, let's go through, we'll go through and try to hit the blanks. There are two lines that have something to do with earnest money. And the two lines, one says that you're presenting earnest money with the offer, and one says that you are presenting earnest money after the acceptance. Okay. Most times now, the after acceptance is the line that should be filled, and that's because we do most of our presentation online now. We send the offer to somebody. Now, if you have checked the first box and you have it, and I think it's a great thing, is that then with your offer, you send a copy of the check that's in your possession, and you would qualify that you're presenting and the earnest money with the offer at that point. It is more powerful to me that somebody upfront wrote out money and put it at risk. I think it's more powerful. Some don't. Who's got baseline rules on earnest money and the amounts? Anybody? Heather, you gotta, I need at least this much, or this is what
I'm
I.
so flexible, Lance. I don't really have rules. But
I know that about you.
typically it's about $1,000
Okay.
and I don't need to check. We'll write the offer. I mean, and that's, a lot of old timers are kind of pissy about earnest money. Oh, I want to see a copy of it. But like, what if you're paying digitally to Remax Concepts?
Yeah.
You don't need a copy of anything. I work with a lot of first-time home buyers who don't even know what checks are.
I know, right? I know. Good news, because of our foray into electronic earnest money, the DMAR board we've had one presentation, and we're going to look at others, is looking at making that association-wide, that it is earnest money. So pat yourselves on the back for leading the charge into the new world of digital earnest money and the ability for somebody to just go on, click, click, click. The one that we had presented, I mean, it was amazing. You went on to the listing as the buyer's agent, you went onto the listing, you click, and it pops up this screen. You fill out a few things that has you as the agent that's asking for the money, a picture and an address of the house that's on the MLS that you're sending the request for earnest money to. So there's no like, oh, that isn't the house, which we've had, where, oh, that's the wrong address or whatever. And so that is sent, the request is sent with that information already on there. It's tracked. You have the information, both companies have the information. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Lance,
Yes.
they don't actually have to do earnest money though, do they?
They don't, by law, they don't have to do earnest money. It is not a contractual requirement. If you put earnest money down, they should do it. But good question in that if somebody says, I'm going to give you a check for $100 and it doesn't happen in the next week, the check doesn't come in, and the other agent calls and goes, well, we didn't get the earnest money in, so I guess it's canceled. And it's like, no. It does not void a contract when you don't have earnest money.
Mary Kay would disagree with you.
Well, Mary and I can talk sometime. Yeah. No, I understand.
About the amount, another thing about that is, I'll tell people, it's not required, it's customary, typically like $1,000. It depends on the situation.
Yeah,
If it's 100% financing, maybe less.
Right.
But the thing of it is, especially for sellers, they're like, oh, I'm gonna get $1,000. Like, look, do not even think that you're gonna get that money, because it is so difficult for a seller to be awarded the earnest money. And if we have to fight for it, we're probably gonna lose.
Mhm.
So as a listing agent, I don't really even care a super amount about earnest money. If it was $0, I'd probably be like, yo, what are you doing? But
Yeah, I need explanation.
$500, sure, whatever.
They're
Let's
getting
do it.
100% financing, that, they just got married, they don't have anything at
Right.
this point, all that stuff,
I feel like more earnest money can help if it's multiple offers.
Yes, absolutely.
That's when I find
Oh, yeah.
listing agents have come back and said, okay, listen, your offer is not the best, but it's close enough. Could you go up under earnest money?
That's interesting. I've never tried that myself. I have found that possession after closing is a better carrot.
Oh, that's
to
a
dangle.
great, that's a
It
great
depends on the
carrot.
seller's motivation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's a good
Absolutely.
idea to
Yeah.
keep in mind.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking the other agent what motivations there are, because a lot of them just chatter like crazy when you talk to them about their client. And so there's nothing wrong with trying to find out what might work that makes it more important. And like you said, earnest money might not be delayed possession, possession after. Those things are certainly good things that for a seller, if I'm a buyer and I'm really fighting and I know I'm in, I know I want it, I know. There's the idea that I've been working on, I haven't fine tuned it, is that what about some point in that pre-part of the offer in, the financing till pre-approval or the inspection process, what about in some time there, my earnest money automatically becomes non-refundable as a buyer? Wouldn't you like that though? As a seller, wouldn't you like that? It's like, hey, they're making a commitment to me. They're getting serious about it. I'm not saying as the seller asked for it. I'm saying as I'm presenting my buyer, they want that house. If I'm willing to say, hey, look, we're closing, or you can have the $1,500. We're closing. That's how sure we are of the deal. And maybe there's an exception in there or whatever, but when you look at new construction, a ton of new construction is non-refundable, especially if you make a selection, then it goes non-refundable immediately. So it's just an idea of possibly getting your offer accepted over somebody else's when it's exactly the same.
And aren't we seeing sellers get to keep that earnest a little more frequently than we have in the past?
Based on,
Just if the buyers want to get out of the deal.
yeah,
And reasons are being fabricated to get out of the deal.
bantered back and forth. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
It depends on what you can prove,
Mhm.
as a buyer. Okay, quick lesson on earnest money. Okay, earnest money comes, you put it together, the deal's in works, okay? And it falls apart for some reason. It falls apart, okay? If after going over that transaction, in dot loop and probably calling you, I look at it, I can make a decision that either the buyer or seller can get that money. I'm not bound by anything other than by law, because, you can be sued. And so I look at that. Now, if I believe that the buyer should get the money back, then after 30 days of the dispute, catch that, of the dispute. So it can't be 30 days from the start of the offer, 30 days from when it was supposed to close, 30 days from anything. It's 30 days from the disputed claim where you say, I want my money back. The seller goes, no, that's a dispute. From that point on, I have 30 days. At the end of 30 days, I decide that the buyer can have the money. And then we send letters to both buyer and seller saying, this is what we intend to do, absent you bringing litigation. For the seller, it's 6 months before we can send that letter. And then we can send the letter to both parties saying, we intend to send this to the seller, absent litigation, okay? So that's how earnest money works for that return. If you ever want to talk to somebody about it when they're upfront, it doesn't belong to the buyer or the seller once it's in the transaction. It belongs to the transaction. If I can't determine, or I'm unswayed by paperwork, then I will leave it in the earnest money in the trust fund, and it will sit there until somebody either brings some kind of suit to it. In that case, then I give it to the court and go, you guys decide. If somebody doesn't, then at some point it sheets to the state, and the state has the money. Yes, ma'am.
Is it true that if you, let's say I'm representing a buyer, they back out of an agreement, the earnest money is in dispute, but the listing has gone active again, if they accept another offer, can they have earnest money sitting in their trust account from two different buyers on the same property?
They can.
They can.
They can. It is extremely dangerous as a listing agent to have your seller sign a purchase agreement when the other one is not canceled.
But the cancellation could be there, but the dispute's not there. But
But
because the
by,
earnest money
yeah,
return is
but
on the cancellation.
yeah, the earnest money
got it.
returns on the cancellation.
Got
I
it.
try to get at least you countering the earnest money. And it kind of says, well, we sort of accept the cancellation, but, not the earnest money part.
Sure.
But yeah, the reality is that at that point, it's not canceled. Anytime you have a second purchase agreement, it should be in there, other provisions, whatever, that is subject to the first agreement becoming null and void. That's what it needs to have.
But that's when you'll get your earnest money back for sure.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. You'll get it back from the seller typically. I mean, there's all kinds of tricks. I think Heather and I have talked about this over the years. I mean, if it's really a thing and you absolutely as a buyer going, it's my money, there's no reason for them to hold it, blah, 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 all that stuff. And the seller's like, I don't care, I'm not signing off. I mean, go down and record your purchase agreement. And so then when they have to try to clear title, that'll come up as a cloud. So just a thought. That's being really mean, Michelle. That's being very mean.
That's punitive.
That's, yes, that's, you better have your ducks in a row if you're gonna do that. So earnest money, either way, we talked about that. Then you go to the paperwork for the mortgage. You need to describe the kind of mortgage that you're going to do, conventional, government, and the more description you have there, probably the better. See, here's the thing, when you're filling out the mortgage information on there, you are protecting your buyer, okay? Because you're specific about the information that's going in the purchase agreement. So the old thing, I don't see it as much anymore. I used to see it a lot where it said interest rate, they would write best or current. There's no protection to your buyer if you do that. And I tell people, old guy stories, what they call them dad tales. I tell people about the first time that we went to war in Kuwait, way back in the old days. When that happened, the interest rate changed from 9 to 11.5 in one day. If you put best and your people could afford the house at 2.5% more interest, they're buying it. So think about that. Control that for your buyers.
Stupid question.
Yes.
Why is it a term no less than X number of years? I have a buyer that put in 30 years, but they want to go down to a 15-year mortgage.
Again, this is the qualifying.
Right, I know it protects
so
them and they don't have to
It
do
protects,
15
if they qualify for 30 years, that's good. If they want to do 15, it's totally fine. If they want out and their denial letter says they applied for a 15-year mortgage and were denied, they haven't met the criteria for getting out of the transaction.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
The
Got it.
denial letter is
That's
for
why
a
it says that.
15-year mortgage. You would have to have a denial letter that stated that they applied for a 30-year mortgage and they were denied.
Is it worth changing that through an amendment if they change, like, right around appraisal, if they decide to go from the 30 to a 15? Is it worth even putting it in writing or just not bother?
It's totally up to you. Buy the book, that's a thing. I've done it, but usually I've done it because there's another thing that needs to have an addendum, whether it be closing date or blah, blah, blah. And so I'll flip it, or it's changing style, I'm going from one style of loan to another,
Sure, that makes sense.
so. Okay. So yeah, note interest at, it's the interest or less. So the question that you have to ask, however you want to ask it, the question is, at what point would you walk away? So the interest rate now, what's it, about 4.5, give or take, 4.25. You know, at what point would you as a buyer go, yeah, I'm out? Is it 5? Is it 4 3/4? Where are you uncomfortable? That's the level that I need to put it, because I might not know the interest rate locked in yet, you know, and I don't want to have it, you know, I don't want to put 4 1/4 and tomorrow have it be 4 3/8, you know. You want to have a little leeway in there. So talk to them about that. Let them know this is protection for them, that you're interested in making sure that they're not locked in to a situation that they don't want to be in. Okay. So you go in there, all lender contingencies need to be met. A written pre-approval within 2 days from acceptance. How often does that happen?
Shouldn't be before. Should be before.
Well, I'd love to have a pre-approval before, but you know, the
If you
people.
read the contract, it
Yeah.
says after.
Yeah, the pre-approval can be after. I wouldn't accept one without at least the pre-qualify. Now, there's variables in there, you know, I mean, if Heather's calling me and I've got a listing, she's like, these buyers are perfect, everything's good, we're like that. I know her. I know she's good. I know that she's been qualifying before them and stuff like that, but it's Friday night and she's not getting me a pre-qual letter. All right. So I'll say, look, I'll tell you what, let's take a look at it, see if we can put something together. I'm going to put back on there that by Monday, close of business, I want a pre-qual letter. Oh, I'm cool with that. Okay. So you can work through that, but.
Or like, you know, sometimes buyers are approved for much more than what they're buying the house for. And so they're like, well, you know, could you not share this? Or you
Yeah.
decide that you don't want to share it because it might give their
Yeah.
negotiating.
I have
away.
redacted the amount before.
Well, I'm far lazier than that. So that's where I just say, no, I've got it. I'll give it to you after acceptance.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. No, I
For
understand.
buyers that have been looking for 2 years.
You might have an expired one.
Yeah, yeah,
Possibly.
yeah, haven't expired when you gotta get back right away. So they're making their best efforts, trying to get a pre-approval in 2 days after the acceptance, and then followed by a final loan commitment. That means the lender contingencies, the title and the appraisal are done. That's final commitment. So don't be thinking you're going to get a final commitment 2 weeks before closing. It's not gonna happen for you. It's not gonna work. You know, I want to know it's closing. Well, you know, do the best you can. But that's where I like the pre-approval to actually be a pre-approval, not a prequel. And we get those terms mixed up a lot. Is that when you send me a pre-approval and it says subject to a credit report, job verification, you know, all these things, I'm like, okay, it's not pre-approval. Okay, that's a
What's the bare
prequel.
minimum to hit pre-approval? Is it credit check? Is there a bare minimum?
I want to know that the credit has been checked and they know they have jobs.
Job verification.
So, I mean, that's what should be, is at least those two things, that credit is good, income is good. Those two are the two biggest problems that we run into. So you want to know that those are there, okay? So if you don't get the written pre-approval, the final loan commitment or loan denial by the specified dates, then the seller, after those dates, may rescind the agreement. Okay, so they can give the 5-day notice to perform. Say, okay, you have to show me, one, you haven't shown me your pre-approval yet, so you got 5 days. That comes in really handy when another offer comes in, or people are like, oh my God, it's our dream house, we'll do anything. And the other people have given you a pre-qual, they're like, hey, you have 5 days. I need a pre-approval in 5 days. That's it. You don't get it, over. Okay. The other thing is that if you're going along and it's supposed to close in 4 days and you got nothing, you know, it's like, we're close. You know, it should be an extra day or two. It's just, you know, paperwork, you know, the paperwork snafu at the lender, you know, that always comes in. So you can say, okay, here's the deal. You have 5 days. 5 days, you get me that final loan commitment. Now, here's the kicker. People like, oh, we're going to give them the 5 days and stuff like that. Understand, that at the end of 5 days, the offer is completely null and void. You got nothing. So, I mean, you're playing all your cards in one hand right there. I mean, you're just laying them on the table, because if they can't make it and the next day they were going to be able to, and you serve them the 5 day, it's over. And if they want to go, okay, man, it's gone. There's nothing you can do. You have nothing on paper at that point. Okay, so it's totally done. Okay. Agreement null and void, earnest money released to the buyers when you serve 5 day, no matter what the reason. Okay, you serve a 5 day, they don't perform, buyers get it. If the thing is, if the sellers choose not, then it remains valid, and it goes along from there. Okay. People getting the financing part, that's a very important part of the purchase agreement. We won't spend near enough time getting that put together so everybody understands the process there. That says a lot. It says a lot in that when you talk to a lender and anything in that changes, not the 15 year or 30 year, but if anything else in there changes, the lender usually needs an addendum or an amendment to make that change. Okay. Then you have the assumption of mortgage or contract sale, and it sees attached addendum. That's called the financing addendum. It goes over each of them circumstances individually about how it's going to work, what it's going to do. We don't have a lot of assumptions going on. When the interest rate gets to about 5 or 5.5, don't be surprised, because there were a lot of FHA loans that are out there at 3 3/4 that are assumable, and would have, your house might sell prior to another one if you find out that it's an FHA assumable loan. You've got a good, strong buyer. The difference between what they owe and what you're paying is not massive. You can make up that difference and assume that loan and end up walking out the door with 3 1/4, 3.5% interest for the remainder. Okay.
Along with PMI.
Well, yes, but they're working on the PMI thing. Hopefully they'll get that changed where it is going to go away at a certain level, because people were talking about the unfairness of that. So, but at least if you could get it in there, and if, maybe it's interest rates you can get for 5 years, the difference between PMI at 3 1/4 or 3.5 versus 5%, it might be worthwhile to look at the numbers and see what's going on there. Okay. In cash with proper form of ID, of course, is required. The part in there that you have to be aware of in the cash is that it's not contingent upon the buyers obtaining such funds. Okay, it's not that they have to have it. Okay, it's not a contingency. It's a disclosure basically. So it's not a contingency. I'm going to pay cash, but I got to get it first. Okay, unless you make it subject to the sale of a property or the closing of a property. Cash is cash. It's just, you showed it's in my bank account. I can buy the house right now and write a check. Okay, if you can't show that, it's not officially a cash. It may be a mortgage, it may be different.
And not a suitcase of cash from your mattress.
Usually you need better verification than that.
Okay.
All right, so then the part in here, it says subject to completion of sale. Okay, subject to completion of sale. All that says is that I've got an accepted offer on my property, and the purchase of this home, I have to close on that property first and get the proceeds from that property to be able to buy this one. Okay, the first thing it ought to ring a bell in your head is like, I got some coordinating to do. Okay, because now it's like, all right, now I got a closing over here, then closing over there, and my people are buying another house over here. So now I got 3 closings in a row. The most I've done is 5. But have you done more than that? The row the closings in a row? You probably have. It's,
Yeah, I think I was number 2 in a 6
yeah,
months, and it was all.
it's brutal.
screwed up.
It's brutal. Yeah, it's really, because what happens in there is that you have 5 different agents all trying to work together. The thing that you need to understand, and agents tend to forget about and not pay attention, is that when you're doing that and you're doing, let's say you have a 5 string, okay? There's 5 closings that are gonna have to take place, okay? You close from the front end, the first one, you close from there and it goes down to the line to the last one, and then they move going backwards, okay? So I love this when somebody's like, you know, like, well, we want possession like, you know, like the same second as closing. No, it's not doable, okay? It's not doable. We have to, you know, in the perfect world, all 5 of them were sitting there and everybody signs, their truck's loaded, then they get in and leave. That doesn't work, okay? So have some flexibility, some understanding of what's going on, you know? Maybe like on the front end, it's somebody that has an apartment, you go, you know what? You could stay in your apartment for a couple more days. That'd be awesome. We would do this for you if you did that. Or the people on the far end are going into a vacant property, new construction or whatever, and you say, hey, if there's any way you could slide out a little early and get into that property, we could, you know, buy you dinner or whatever, and try to click off 1 or 2 off the ends of that so it works better, okay? So, questions about subject to completion of sale? Okay, appraisal in there, you know, you put it in there that it's contingent upon that. In most cases, it's contingent upon the appraisal anyway, because financing is contingent upon the appraisal, okay? Now, as you gain more down payment, if you're putting 20% down and you get to about, you know, 96% of value, and the bank looks at it and they'll be like, yeah, close enough. It's okay. We can still do the loan. We'll do it. We can get it done. Okay. So it's possible that it can be done also on, you know, cash and all those other things. You know, you have that. People tend to do it. That they check that, and then one of the things I saw is that it came through and it's contingent upon the property appraising by the buyer or the lender's appraiser at or above the purchase price. Okay, and the buyer goes in and the property appraises $3,000 under, and the seller goes, "We'll lower the price," and the buyer's like, "Yeah, thanks anyway." Do they get their earnest money back? Buyer gets their earnest money back. They can walk away. Okay, so make sure you understand what you're having them sign and what you're checking, because what you're saying is if it doesn't appraise, you know, there has to be another agreement. You know, negotiations have to open back up. Okay, then subject to sale. Who loves subject to sales?
Why not?
I agree. I totally agree. So let's see, where are we? Two pages away or something like that. This is subject to sale addendum that you can flip over to if you want to. We can move this. Where's the thing go? Oh, it's over there. You have it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll switch over there real quick just to talk about that.
But one quick thing is you will never have subject to completion of sale and subject to sale check. It's either or.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
That's okay, while we're there.
And don't check subject to completion of sale if they don't have an offer on their property accepted. Okay? Don't do that. Been there. Not good. So, subject to sale. Subject to sale means that I want to buy your property. We're going to agree on price and contingencies and those things. And then I'm going to try to sell my house and when and if I sell my house, then I'm going to buy yours. So the bottom line is that a subject to sale purchase agreement is only an agreement on price and terms. It's really all it amounts to at that point. It's an agreement on price and terms. Everything else remains the same. You keep the property on the market, you continue to market the property, you do all of those things as if there wasn't another offer on it. Okay? So that's the only thing. It's just an agreement to price and terms if you happen to get an offer on your property. So if the buyer's property sells prior to the date above, which is the time frame that you've given in this top box, and if it sells prior to that date, then the buyer notifies the seller. Excuse me. And if the buyer tells the seller first, the contingency of the offer stays in effect. The financing contingency stays in effect. It's still subject to completion of all of that, okay? Because the buyer notified the seller that they had an offer on their property. Okay. The most misunderstood part now, the seller gets an offer on their property, a second offer. Does not matter if it's for more, does not matter if it's another subject to sale offer, does not matter. They have an offer they're willing to accept, and they accept it subject to notice being given to the first buyer. Okay? They give notice to the first buyer, and in here it says, the buyer has a specific amount of time. What's the normal times everybody uses? 72, okay.
24.
24, 12,
I asked for 48 if it's my.
48,
I've
okay.
done 0 once.
And a girl.
Mhm.
Okay, let me explain something to you. It may change your mindset about what subject to sale means, okay? Because we get in here, can you scroll that up
Sure.
just a touch? Just a touch. Whoa, okay. So in here it says the seller may demand removal of this contingency by service of a written notice to the buyer or buyer's agent, specifying that the seller shall have this many hours, excluding weekends, legal holiday, to remove the contingency. Everybody goes, yeah, remove, that's all you gotta do, remove the contingency. Continue to read and provide written proof if sufficient financing to perform on the purchase of the property referenced above. Okay? So if I, the seller, notify the buyer and you don't have your property sold, the only option you have is to prove to me you can buy it without selling it. That's your only option. You can't go, well, I got a buyer, I think they're gonna rate, call them up right away, tell them we'll give them $5,000 less. Come on, let's put this deal together so we can keep our house. It's too late. It's too late at that point. The seller notified the buyer. When that happens, then they have to prove that they have written proof of sufficient financing to close on the property. Okay?
So wouldn't you want to have then, if you're representing the buyer more time, if you're representing the seller less time in that box?
The thing about time is, the only reason a buyer would need time was to be able to talk to a lender to see if they could get financing. If you're doing a good job with the buyer,
They've already done that.
you've done that already, because what I tell people is, look, let's go to the bank, let's sit down and talk to them. Let's see if that option is available to you. Because when that offer comes in and you're frantic and going around, oh my God, should we, your only decision should be whether or not you want to buy it at that point. Not whether or not you can, not if you can get financing, not if Aunt Sue's going to loan us some money, that shouldn't be the decision process. The decision process needs to be at that time that we know we can, do we want to? And you think back, it's like, we had 5 showings this week. 2 people are set up to come back a second time. The agent's like, man, we're right there. we're right there. And you're like, my God, I just love this house. It's where I want it to be. It's everything that we've dreamed of. It's in the neighborhood and the school system and the location, and it backs up to this or that, all these things. So at that point, is it worth it for you to take that chance, and go on into it, hoping that your house is going to sell. You don't even need the financing and it moves forward. But it is not contingent upon that financing at that point. It's gone. The whole financing contingency goes away. Not there anymore. Okay? So, no longer be subject to sale or completion of sale of the buyer's property or the financing provisions of the purchase. Gone. They're not there. You're buying the house. Period. That makes sense to everybody? Because it is highly misunderstood. Highly.
So what happens if, am I going to move?
Not yet.
Okay.
Let's hear the question.
What happens if you have 5 hours even? Seller says, hey, I have another offer. The next hour, the buyer gets an offer on their house.
Mm-hmm.
And you go back and say, okay, great, we can remove the contingency. No, that still does not apply. It does not go to a subject to close.
No. It's who tells who first. Okay? So it is of utmost importance that you make sure that if you're like in that situation and that house is there and everything like that, and the second you get a signature on that document, man, don't go celebrate. Get the notice to the seller. We got an offer. We're into now because shall be subject to closing and obtaining proceeds of the pending sale.
Right.
Okay. We're still there. We're in. We got an offer in the nick of time. I called the listing agent, and they were ready to sign an offer from another party. We won. Okay? So it's who notifies who first. Questions?
I
Yeah.
was gonna say, on the listing side too, note that there are some other subject to sale addendums out there that specify that the seller would have to receive another offer in order to do the push. This one does not. I know Iowa's does not,
Yeah.
but do you know who's, I don't remember whose it is that has.
I don't.
So just know that from the list side as to whether or not you're allowed to push it.
Wait a minute. You can read the paperwork.
Well, occasionally I do.
Stop. Yeah. So, and so make sure you understand. Now, here's the deal, whether the offers come in on your listing or you're presenting a subject to offer to the other party, do each other a service, because each purchase agreement speaks to the forms that are going to be used. Okay. So if you bring me an offer and you're from a different company, I'm going to be like, will you go ahead and send me over the forms that are associated with the subject to sale? Because I'm going to need those, because there may be a little nuanced difference. And if I send you my release from our paperwork, it might not mesh correctly with the paperwork that your subject to came from. Okay, wording, it's close, it's really close, but there's little minute details that you want to have their paperwork. What notice do they need to have? And the same thing when you present an offer that is subject to sale, give them the paperwork, the notice of paperwork, so that they have that available to them if in fact they get an offer or whatever, they get that opportunity. Okay. And that's like the notification of sale of subject property. So that's the one where the buyer is notifying the seller. Then the notice of removal of subject to sale is the one where we have those.
I think I've got all 4 forms in there.
Okay, so So this one is one that we kind of put together to make it a little bit more understanding. So because the others were kind of, like, oh, what one do I use and when should I use it and that. So we put this one together to try to make it make a little bit more sense. So this is where the buyer's notice to the seller, it's like we've received a contract and we're removing it, or the house is not sold, attaches written proof of sufficient financing to be able to move forward with the purchase agreement, and it's no longer, or oops, we're unable to perform, contracts null and void. So in the case if you have, Tanya, if you have 72 hours, don't make them wait for 72 hours if you can't do it. If you're not willing to do it, I see that one, I'm saying nothing until 72 hours. It's my time. What the hell for? You can't perform, sign off. Allow the people go on about their business. There's nothing's going to change in 72 hours unless you have the ability to get the financing and prove it. Okay? All right. All right, back to the purchase agreement again. Second page. Oh, there's other financing terms, I'm sorry, on that first page. And then there typically, like if you're getting closing costs or something like that, you want to put down the closing costs and what they're for. You want to be, most lenders, I believe they still do this. I'm getting out of touch more and more as we go along. But most times the lenders required you to specify what the money was to be used for. And so to make sure that the money all got used, then you do it subject to closing, or the closing costs to include actuals, prepaids, and what's the other one? Buy downs, yeah. So to include all of those things so that you can, so it's closing costs, buy downs, actuals, and prepaids, because they're all different categories. If you just say closing costs, there are some things that some lenders don't call closing costs. And so you get $3,000 worth of closing costs and they use $2,300 for closing costs, yet, you've got, insurance and you've got inspection clause, you've got all these things that the money could be used for, but you're not using it because you didn't specify that it could be. Okay, so you will get your feet held to the fire sometimes on that. Closing and possession. Ours still says closing is on or about. Anybody know what on or about means? Any familiar at all with on or
30
about?
days. That's what Robin Folder would say.
Yeah, yeah, well, and she could be right. In the court of laws that I'm aware of, they deemed it to be 2 weeks. That once 2 weeks has passed, then you're not about anymore. You're in a point of renegotiation, that kind of stuff. Now, we all know that if it says a date and you pass that date, most lenders want an amendment changing the date. Obviously, with precision forms, you would have to have that addendum changing the date because it's on or before.
What's it gonna be in the basic form from the?
I believe it's on or about still. I'm pretty sure I looked that up. It got sent to me. I didn't study every detail of it because it's at the attorney now to have them look over all the legal wording that's in a purchase agreement. So on or about, and the closing is to be on or about, and possession then is to be set up. Okay? Now understand that in possession, the reason that we started putting AM and PM and times and stuff in there is because if I put closing and possession to be October 2nd, when can you have the house?
11:59 p.m.
11:59 p.m. of October 2nd is what the law says I have to give you the house by. I just have to give it to you on that date. Okay? So understand what you're telling people or asking people. So we ask for times. I prefer times, but sometimes you put immediately following closing. That's fine. You can do that so that you're closing at 10 o'clock. You expect to drive from the lender to your house and it's yours and it's done and ready to go. If it's different than that, please get it in writing. Don't say, don't worry, I know you're closing at 10, look, as long as you're out by 12, no big deal, I'm good. Right up until they pull up at 10 o'clock and they start raising hell because you're still in their house and it says 10 o'clock. Okay? Then all of a sudden you're in trouble, everybody's mad, all that kind of stuff. So, I know the leeway and you can always judge and guide by the agent and the buyer and the seller, how are they doing, that kind of stuff. But the bottom line, if it's not in writing, it's not enforceable. It just isn't. Okay, that's the bottom line. If you go to court or you go sit in an attorney's office or anything like that, and you walk in, what's the very first thing they want to see? Paperwork. Because what it says is that's how it's going to be. What it says, that's how it's going to be. They don't infer, oh, that must mean, they should have said, it's like, that's what it says, that's what it is. That's how the world works. Because for attorneys and judges and like that, it's black and white. It just is. Okay. There's no leeway. There's no like, oh, I meant, should have, any of that stuff. It's like, that's it. You're done. So put in there exactly what you mean. If you don't know, then change it. Do an addendum. Do it early on. One of the problems we had on a closing that we were struggling with here was that the decisions about when moving was going to be was done about two and a half weeks prior to closing. The people were in an apartment. They had given notice and the landlord had rented that unit out. They were out of leeway. It was gone. When you could have before, said, hey, look, this end, give me a little bit because this end has to figure the dates out there. They're writing an offer. You understand that you've got both ends have to work. Dates and times have to work in the process. Everybody has to have that opportunity. Because on this one, we ended up, people couldn't move in. They had to put all their stuff in storage, move into the basement of a relative and live in a bed that they carried in. Serious, unfinished basement. They're going to live there for 2 weeks because the other end isn't ready and the one said on or before. Okay, so that's important stuff. Does anybody know what possession, when you give possession, when that is? It's when you have access to the property. If you have a key, you're in possession. Okay, so if I give you a key at closing, you now are in possession.
But not if you can't go into the house.
If you're agreed to not,
Right.
yes, that's correct. Then it's a tenant situation where you'd have to give notice and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But yes. But if absent the agreement, if I hand you a set of keys, that house is yours, you can walk in the door.
Right.
Okay, taxes. Everybody understands taxes, right? No problems. We can just zoom right past that one. Everybody's good with that? Shucks. Okay. Heather, you got it.
I got it.
You got it.
Are you saying figuring the taxes? Because we'll cover that more on the sellers.
Yeah, on the seller side, when we come in, we're going to actually go into figuring taxes and all that kind of stuff. The understanding of taxes and proration and all that kind of stuff can do you good when you're talking to a buyer because you understand what's going to be required of them. Because they get, quote, a prorated amount that is not shown on the documents that the lender provides to you, and they freak out because they're like, it says we're gonna have $5,000 at closing, I only have $3,000. You need to understand proration because the CD is going to show a different number. Okay, it's going to show some cost paid, credits, all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Special assessments, we want to talk about that just a touch, because assessments on the property, they got to get paid or they got to get negotiated. And by assessments on the property, I mean, it can be liens on the property, like the One Waterworks likes to put assessments, quote, liens against the property. They like to they're gonna put a new sidewalk in, and so there's an assessment against the property. Because like in my case, the rental property, you've had three people out there that say they're gonna come and put a new sidewalk in the front. None of them showed up yet. And the city's like, so if I don't get it done in 2 weeks now, I'm gonna have an assessment on my property. So those we need to have and understand. Was it now the Des Moines Waterworks can put a sewage lien against it, but not a water lien, I believe is how it works now. That sounds right.
I haven't come across that.
It says you have to pay for water, sewage, solid waste, and any assessments of maintenance that are attributable to seller's possession. But I don't think they can lien water, but anyway.
I thought they could.
They can
Or is that
lien.
just Des Moines that doesn't? Because water's a lien.
Water is, or
Mhm.
I thought they were changing the water and just going to sewage and,
If it's been changed, I don't know.
okay. Yeah, I'm not sure, so I apologize for not being prepared. Duties of the parties is just the point where you re-explain to them how things are working. Who represents who in the transaction, that kind of thing. And it's also what I tell people is when I'm writing with them, this is my first escape clause in a purchase agreement. Because they need to understand, see, you're so involved and right in the middle with it, and you're writing and negotiating and do all that kind of stuff. And we're all buddy. And so they think that, you're part of it. You're not. You are not part of the transaction. Okay? So the whole idea is that you tell them this is between the buyer and the seller, period. Okay? It's between you two. We're on the outside trying to make it work, trying to negotiate, trying to make things happen, but we're not party to the transaction. Okay? And then also about, they have to disclose material defects, the buyers, they agree to that. Condition of the property, this is called the inspection clause. It's another misunderstood. Man, just like,
Let me go push some buttons again.
I don't know, I'm like, gee whiz. It's just me, is what you're telling me, you're right. I'm sorry, it's an age thing, that's how
Bad
it works.
idea.
That's how it works.
Can we open the window?
No. No, I've been asking for them to put a little ceiling fan in there that just moves the air a touch, just a little. That would be wonderful. Okay, so condition of property sets up a process by which people can look at the property and then decide, what, if anything, needs to be done in that property. And the first thing they do is they agree that the sellers are gonna keep it in its present condition, ordinary wear and tear, is accepted from that. And that the buyers can make an inspection prior to closing of the property to make sure that it is kept in that kind of condition. But in the inspection thing, you get so many business days is what ours says. That's the other clause that you'll find. Some people have just calendar days, some people have business. So make sure you pay attention to that part of it. But you have so many business days after the final acceptance date. Everybody, what's the final acceptance date?
Last date on all the signatures
Last date of all the signatures and
on the PA?
delivery of the
No, it
documents.
doesn't include delivery.
It does include delivery, okay? You, in a court, you want this at the last day, but the whole thing isn't final until delivery of the documents to all parties, just so you know that part. So the buyers then have at their sole expense, they can have the property inspected. And it can be by anybody. It can be, Uncle John, that was a plumber for a year before he went to work in the office. It doesn't matter, okay? There's nothing that says that it has to be a certified person that's doing the inspections, those kinds of things. I'd love if we got to that point, actually. But here's the deal, that it's by person or persons to determine if there are any structural, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, lead-based paint, other deficiencies or hazards. Now, where we get caught up is the other deficiencies, okay? That's where there's a puddle of dirt in the basement in the southeast corner that needs to be swept up. Okay, so that's where that stuff comes in, and it comes in under other deficiencies. If you're working with a buyer, explain to them that this is not the place they decide whether or not they want to buy the house. If they're not sure they want to buy the house, they're too far. You've gone too far right at that point. It's like, well, if you're not sure, we need to pull up. We don't want a clause that you're going to go in and see if it's okay. See if you want to buy the house. Okay, so that's one thing that people think. And then it's not to be construed as an inspection to bring an older home into compliance with current building codes. So you can't say, although I've seen it, I want the wiring brought up to code. I've seen it multiple times. In fact, I changed every outlet in the house to 2-prong for the people because that's code.
And that filled you with satisfaction.
They were so upset. And I'm like, you said you wanted code. Code is 2-prong. Because ungrounded outlets is the issue, not that it's not code, okay? It's ungrounded outlets. So in the process here, tell your people that this is to look at the house and see, are there some surprises? Are there some things that would, whether or not you're gonna really want the house of the issues without them being fixed, without them being addressed. So you have to decide, is it worth the issue, number one? And if it is a deficiency that's going to be an issue, then you present that to the sellers, okay? There's no part in here that says you found the deficiencies and you decided you don't want to buy it anymore. That's not in this clause. It doesn't say that in any form. It says that you find a deficiency, then you offer to the seller what the deficiency is. The seller then has an opportunity to inform you of what they will do about the deficiency, and you have the opportunity to decide if, in fact, what they propose is satisfactory. Now, one of the things that happens a lot of times is that people, they send the list that we want this, and this repaired by this electrician, and this way. See, that's not what it says. It says we found deficiencies in the electrical. Okay, why would you want to limit the electrical if you're the buyer's agent? Why would you want to limit that? It's like, here's the inspection report. It shows these deficiencies. Why would you want to pick and choose of those electrical deficiencies or tell them how to fix them? They tell you how they think they should, or they ask you, what can we do? How could this work? Something like that. But you put your people in a position, if you just say, we want these 3 things fixed, and this is the way we want them fixed, and the seller says, okay.
So are you saying just say these 3 things are broken?
Basically, we find deficiencies in these 3 areas. And if they are, in an inspection report, I'll pull those 3 items out of the inspection report and send them to them. Now, efficiency is that, hey, we got these 3 things wrong. If you just do this, this, and this, we're good with it. And I can live with that. I can live with that. But have you put your people into a compromised position without ever asking to have somebody, then do things? Because, it's like, hey, we got this, this, and this. What if you tell them that those are the only things that you want done on the electrical system, and the electrician comes in and goes, hey, I can do those things, but this whole thing is deficient, the whole system. You don't
Yeah,
have,
right, like we hear about it.
you don't have anything to go on them. You have nothing to work with. So if you come back on an inspection process, just understand how you work with it. I don't mind, I don't care. But understand the process. You inform the seller of a deficiency. The seller informs you of a remedy. You make a decision if the remedy satisfies you. That's the process. If inside of that process, you want to make suggestions, you want to say, if you just did this, we'd be good with it. However, that's fine. I don't care about that.
Okay, so for example, let's say you've got 3 electrical issues.
Yes.
Just random electrical stuff. So you would say, and I can't remember what the inspection form says, but buyers are not satisfactory below is what then you write in the box. And so in the box, you would just say 3 random electrical issues, period. Or would you say seller to correct 3 random electrical issues so that electrical system functions as originally intended? You could. Does that cover the?
Yeah, it does kind of, and like I said, it's kind of your comfort with the wording. And I apologize because I deal with a lot of it like we want out, and here's what we wrote. And then I'm trying to figure out, okay, how's this going to work? Because the buyer wants out or, in the transaction, then they put this information down. And if you specifically say things that you want and the seller goes, done. It's over.
Right.
There's nothing there. I hate that there's 11 items that the buyer brings and the seller does 10. Don't let your sellers do that unless the 10th one or the 11th one is really a big deal. Don't let them do that because you've just passed the ball back to the buyer to say, do you want out?
31 of 32.
All you got to do is sign off that doesn't work. Okay, so that's my goal here. It's just to have an understanding of the process. But yeah, in that scenario, say we found deficiencies in the electrical, and I would put, the lines of, information, either the electrical page, which most inspectors do, you just turn the electrical page over to them. So I'm not telling them how to fix it. I'm saying this is the problem. And then I say, I want a licensed electrician to do this work.
Oh, well, I guess that's. I never tell them how to fix it, just who I want to fix it. Licensed electrician,
Okay,
qualified contractor.
yes. Thanks for throwing that last one in, because I love when they say all work to be done by licensed people.
Licensed handyman.
And it's a,
Good luck
it's
with
a
that.
roof, it's like, okay, there's
So,
no,
question back
there's
to
no licensing.
electrical.
Yes,
What if whether or not we have a deficiency, it depends on who you talk to. Federal Pacific panel,
oh, I call that out immediately.
sellers claiming, nope, we had it checked out when we got it. It was
Show me. Show me in writing where an electrician said that it was not deficient, that it was functioning properly and was safe.
So,
I had it in writing. I can dig up an electrician if you need one who can.
oh, I found one
Yeah.
that said absolutely not, but this is where it
Yeah.
doesn't technically say that there's something wrong with it in the report, but we want it replaced anyway
Yeah.
because it's,
Yeah, and if
Unsafe,
I
right?
see
So-
that, I'll write that in the offer. I won't even wait
I
for the
did.
inspection. If I see a Federal Pacific box, I want it addressed right up front.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. If you see things and you're knowledgeable of those things when you're walking through, and you walk in, you see this big crack in the driveway. Don't wait for the inspection. Cite it. Put it on paper that there's something there that is going to have to be taken care of.
so then, but going back to the panel, would you simply say that you need to pull permits, you need to do it by licensed electrician? and do any additional work required by the city?
Yeah, if you do a licensed electrician, that's probably as far as you can stretch it.
You don't need to say that they need to pull permits as opposed to.
A licensed electrician has
Should
to
permit
permits.
permits.
Yeah,
Right.
if they're willing to put their license number on there, they better not do the work without a permit. I know guys that'll go around and do it, but they're not gonna hand you their license number when they do the work.
Well, and isn't it because they're licensed, so like they're a licensed electrician, but they operate under like the company's
Depends, yeah,
journeyman's
yeah.
license or something?
Yeah,
So I've
there's,
had electricians on the side, on the weekend do the work.
right,
And then like there's no warranty on it, so
right,
is
there's
there a
no
way that you can
warranty.
stipulate?
Yeah, because the electrician that works for Baker Electric can't go on the site and pull a permit.
Yeah, technically he's unlicensed.
Yeah, he does not have that ability. He is sub-licensed through Baker. So you either
Much like our
find,
licenses,
Huh?
much like our licenses. it
yeah,
sounds like.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. But, some of them have a buddy or somebody that will pull the permit for them underneath their license and they do the work. And it's wherever the comfort level is, But if I tell you licensed electrician, you need to show me their license. And if you can't show me their license, I don't believe you.
But so how does she make sure that somebody's not doing side work on the weekend?
Right.
Because I think that's her point. She
Right.
is not cool with that.
Yeah. I don't know. And that would be your decision.
Okay.
Personally, if it's a licensed electrician, whether they're working on the site or not, they have a liability because they have a license. They have a liability. They can't just go, well, I did it on the side, so it didn't count. No, that's not how it works. You're licensed. So, they would take that chance if they did it on the side and didn't work underneath permits and like that, they can get in trouble. So I don't have an issue. If that's a licensed electrician doing the work, I'm kind of okay with it. And I'm kind of okay with a plug-in not being GFI that needs to be, and the seller going, I can throw that in. It takes like 2 minutes. I mean, it's 3 screws for crying out loud. You can't hardly screw that up. I'm okay with the seller doing that, but a lot of people aren't. And, if that's the only issue, I probably wouldn't ask for a licensed electrician. I'd be like, that needs to be replaced. So.
So be cool
Huh?
is your answer. Just be cool.
Well, I think you try to, yeah. I mean, you try
I
to,
think a lot of people should be cool.
the whole idea is a win-win. You're trying to make it all come together, Now, that's not saying that I didn't ask for a licensed electrician, knowing that if a licensed electrician went in there, that there was more work that was going to have to be done. I'm not saying that I haven't done that. It's part of the process. So, okay. So that's how it works. Now, be aware of these these things. If ours says 2 calendar days for response, it talks about calendar days. So if I tell you today at noon about something, when does that time frame start? Calendar day.
Was it noon when you
I
delivered the written?
I took at noon, I gave you the notice. When does it start?
At noon.
Because it's a calendar day. It starts the next full day.
Oh, so they get like 2.5 days.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay, that's the difference between when it says 24 hours, then it starts at noon. When I hand you the piece of paper, tick tock, all right? So be aware, because some purchase agreements say 24, 36, 48 hours. Some places say 2-3 calendar days. Be aware of what's going on, because the calendar day starts at the next full calendar. Okay?
And some purchase agreements don't address it at all.
Yeah, they say, how's it worded? Like you, as soon as possible, kind of.
Yeah,
We need a response,
I think in a timely manner.
anytime, I think
Yeah.
it does say in a timely manner. And like, I just didn't have
Yeah.
time, so apparently it's not time, okay? So, rarely, but every once in a while, they'll make a satisfactory inspection of the property. A lot of times that's investors and stuff. They walk through a house and like, got it, I'm good. and just move on with that. You'll find that a lot in cash buyers. Homeowner's warranty. I like them. If you don't, that's okay. If your buyer doesn't want one, if your buyer does not want one, then we need a waiver. Only from the buyer, only when the buyer doesn't want one, only when it's not new construction. But at that point, we need a waiver.
So do you need the application signed, or only when you need a waiver?
Only when you need a waiver. I've been working on this. Been working diligently on getting these things cleaned up. Our liability is when a buyer can say, I wasn't told. Okay, so that's the one I need to protect us against. So that's why I need a waiver on the buyer when it's not new construction. And I don't care if the waiver's on a home warranty form that says I waive, or if it's on, we have a waiver in our file, you can get it on there, as long as they sign. I was going to put it in an initial right here. We're working on that. I'm waiting till tomorrow. I actually find out about when the new purchase agreement stuff, because it may be worthwhile for Nikki to do her magic on the forms to get that in there that just says buyer waives.
Is this the dot loop, Kristen?
That's the dot loop lady right there.
So,
That's also my daughter. You didn't know that.
I wasn't sure. I thought I had heard that, but.
Yeah. Yeah.
so if you're doing a different warranty company, do we still need the HMS application waiver signed?
Nope.
Perfect.
It doesn't matter what company, you get me a warranty that's waived, I'm good to go. I don't care if it's HSA, AHS, HMS, what is it, HWA, there's all kinds of acronyms out there.
Is it worth fighting for a particular company if the sellers already had to use their warranty because they got something fixed and they already have contacted?
Well, here's my thoughts on that. If you fight for a company and that company sucks, you get blamed.
So no.
So unless the buyer is like, I want this company, then why would you fight about it? And now, if you know the companies, you know that the AHS covers this stuff, but the HSA covers appliances and everything, and this one doesn't, and you're getting all appliances to stay, you might go, hey, just so you know, that's, again, it's a knowledge thing, is knowing what the different ones do and how they do it. So, because some do cover a ton of appliances, some of them cover 0 appliances. So, knowing your situation, because maybe this warranty is like really good, unless I'm keeping, 6 appliances, and they'd be like, if we're doing 6 appliances, I just shouldn't have this one on. Otherwise, I got to add on to the other warranty, for $109 to get the extra. And almost every warranty that I'm aware of, be aware that the add-on, the plus, the extra, the whatever that you,
Yeah, well,
the premium, whatever it is, that little clause thing that they sell for about $100 is the best thing you can do for your buyer. It just waives so much stuff. Just that little bit, and it's like around $100, one way or the other. I bought a ton of them because the buyer's like, like that, or the seller's like, I'm only doing this. I'm like, fine, I'll pay for it. Because I got caught with a furnace one time that would have been covered had that have been on there. The whole furnace would have been covered, and it wasn't. Because my inspector didn't open it up and look inside. How am I doing? Where are we at?
So we're gonna keep this train going,
Okay,
because,
let's Yes.
you have 13 minutes to get through like 47 pieces of paper.
No, that's not good. Okay. Termites, everybody understand termites?
Yep.
Okay, basically, they look for them. If they find them, they have to treat them. If they find damage, they have to repair it. If they repair it, the buyer gets to say, I like it or I don't. Basically how it goes. One thing that came up the other day is the seller is like, I ain't doing nothing. I don't care. And he thought it was going to be null and void. But it's not, because the buyer reserves the right to go, that's okay, I got it. I'll take care of it. Okay? So the buyer can go ahead with the transaction and do the treatment. So, okay. Court approval, that's only necessary if you've got an estate or something like that going on. If you're selling a property out of an estate, sometimes the estate will need to see a comparable system on it so they know that it's going good. It's usually the listing agent problem unless you're doing a favor to somebody. Funds just says that at the time, any funds that come into the transaction are going to be tracked and paid out according to the transaction by your company or the closing company. The general provisions says that in the performance of it, the timing is everything, that it is the heirs, executors, and assigns and that kind of stuff that are part of a transaction, that it continues to go right along through there. If somebody dies, the transaction doesn't. It also says that the contract survives the closing. In other words, when you sign on the dotted line and something is wrong because the seller didn't do it according to the purchase agreement, the seller still has to do it because the transaction or the contract survives that closing. It's in effect. Okay, so if they took the refrigerator and you did your walkthrough 3 hours before you went to the closing and came back, refrigerator's gone, they have to bring it back. Okay, that's my best example. Acceptance, when somebody puts in the, if it's not accepted on or before and you put a date in there, and it's accepted the next day, and you didn't change that date, that if the opposite party acts on the contract, if they act on that contract, it brings it back to life again. It's not automatically null and void. Okay, so don't freak out if it's in there and you forgot to change the date. It said the 9th, you didn't get it signed until the 10th. Don't freak out because the other party, as soon as they do anything that resembles moving forward in the transaction, that date is waived.
So if your lender requires you to change that, tell them to read the contract.
Well, they should. I mean, you know, but yeah, every once in a while they'll be like, oh, because they're law students apparently.
And that's the same with a home inspection too. So if you get past the date to remedy the home inspection, and then your seller, and then the listing agent, the seller responds, even though it's after the date, it's back in play.
Well, there's also no real ramification. If you don't meet the 2-day deadline, this happens. Like, that's not really spelled out.
It's supposed to be null and void. If it, you know, it expires. Yeah, it expires. Where's it? I just turned away from it. Oh, at the
Sorry,
bottom
you
of the
can go
last
backwards.
page.
Oh.
Bottom of the last page. Keep going, right there. Whoop. Shall become, let's see, if
Oh, and the
offer is not
inspection.
accepted on or before, it shall become null and void.
Right, but she was talking about.
Oh, the inspection, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but if they respond after that date, now it's back in play.
Right, but like, there's
Yeah.
nothing that happens if they miss the deadline anyway.
No, not if somebody responds. If you act in a manner that is consistent with the contract, then you've ratified the contract. I think that's pretty close to the wording that the attorneys like to use. So, and in all of this, just so you know, I'm not an attorney, nor will I ever act like one. So,
Oh yeah, I think we're supposed to start with that.
yeah, I think so too. I'm an interpreter of legalese, not a creator. The homeowner association addendum to the purchase agreement is probably one of the worst documents we have in our file. Just so you know that, we're aware of that. The only thing that's important is that it does say any assessments, who they're paid by. That's the important part of this document. Because it says right down here, all homeowner association assessments shall be paid by. So if they're putting a new roof on and everybody is being assessed a certain amount, you have to say that the seller is paying for that, or the buyer is going to just accept it the way it is, or you're going to prorate it so that the seller is paying a certain amount to you, and then you're going to take it over. Okay, so that's the important part of that one. It's not life and death, contrary to what we try to tell you sometimes. Addendums. Addendums are not amendments. okay? Addendums add to the document. As you're preparing it, it's like, I'm adding a page to this, I'm adding a page to this. If you put the document together and everybody signs it and everybody agrees to it, then you're making a change to the document and you need to amend the document, okay? Or you take the easy way out. Who is it that has one form and it's you either check addendum or amend?
It's either or. I use that.
So if you're not sure, you just don't check either one. So that's important. Authorization to
That's
review
just an
final numbers. What is
authorization.
that?
Oh, use it every time, because those lenders were like, sorry, we can't give you the disclosure. The hell you can't, here's the form.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's so stupid because it's been, what's it been?
It's not the point.
2 years now, year and a half?
For trade.
Yeah, where they,
Should do
where they
I don't
said,
disagree.
they said point blank that parties to the transaction and their representatives can see the numbers. It's clear as day on the papers that they put out. And then we still have these lenders go, well, can give that to you. And so,
Representative.
yeah,
Here we go.
exactly. And they literally, in the wording, it says real estate agents in the wording of that.
They went to the very first trade class and then they forgot everything.
Yeah,
that came
Yeah,
out.
they did. So,
3 days.
so yeah, there's another document that you can get if they don't want to give you the CD. Yeah, so you can get the Alta. So if somebody says, I can't give you the CD, say, fine, then make the Alta and get it to me, like later today.
And if all else fails, don't make me have Heather call you.
That's right, I'll have everything, you're done, buddy. So, okay, what do we got? Buyer settlement services agreement. This is only when we are closing the buyer side of a transaction when they're purchasing cash, our listing, or they are doing a contract purchase. If we, the service center, is involved, then we need this signed, okay? And by that, I don't mean the traditional TCs. That's not who it is, okay? They do seller closings no matter what, okay? What we're talking about here is using a different company, which is the Real Estate Service Center Mortgage Closing Department. That's what this is for, okay? If they're going to do something, then we need this signed. Not very clear. We're actually making another form for that instead of this because it's not very clear. HMS, yeah.
I just put the warranty brochure in to talk about the waiver.
Yeah.
The only reason
It's
there.
the waiver. Also, take a second to make sure that your number on the purchase agreement makes sense. Because
Right.
if the home warranty is $489 and you put $479 in there, it's going to be ordered. You only have the agreement with the seller to pay $479. So guess who's paying the extra 10? No. Wrong. You'll notice a little deduction in your commission by $10. Lead-based paint. Lead-based paint is required on,
78 or so,
what'd you say? Before,
78 is not known.
1978.
Never had a good answer to
Yeah,
that.
before. Where's it, do we have it? Oh, there's someplace. Do we have the document? Okay.
Free.
Yeah, pre-1978. So if your home is built in 1978, don't let somebody tell you that you gotta have a lead-based paint disclosure. It is before 1978. As of the January 1st of 1978, it was illegal to have lead-based paint on anything.
So it's 1978 or before.
No, it is before 1978.
That's what I was questioning too.
But if you're my dad, you drug around like 12 cans of lead-based paint to every house you moved into.
It is great paint.
It goes on
Unless
smooth.
you eat it. Yep, that's the only problem. Seller's disclosure. I'll tell you about this. Unfortunately, we cannot ask questions and fill it out. We would have much better seller's disclosures if we did that, but we can't take the liability of asking a question, checking the boxes they tell us to, writing down information when they're 94 years old, and then having them initial and sign it. We're not allowed to do that, so don't do that, okay? It's an absolute shame, because they are better. We do a better job than most people do. Make sure if it is a exempt property, try to get a signature in there. Makes it a lot easier for everybody. By law, Nora, by law, if you're exempt, you don't have to sign nothing. And so you'll get that guy, he's like, it's exempt, I ain't signing nothing. I'm like, I know it says it's exempt. He goes, it's exempt, I don't need to sign something saying it's exempt. And you're gonna lose the argument, so just say, okay, fine, and note on the file, seller says exempt.
Also, if you're exempt, remember you're exempt from septic, because that sucks when you forget.
That you're not exempt.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, septic is not a disclosure thing. It is a state law that it has to be happening. There are, let's see, there's no exemption from that. There are scenarios on septic. So where like the buyer agrees and all that kind of stuff. What is it? Is it a family? Is there a family transfer that's exempt on septic? Can't remember. There's a couple of exemptions.
I don't know, there's something that kept me awake one night. It all worked out
I
fine.
think we've talked about it at length, trying to make sure, also commercial isn't exempt on disclosure. And I don't know if you have a commercial building with a residence in it. We tried to figure that out the other day and we could not figure out, does that then make it exempt because it's commercial or not exempt because there's residence in it? So
Because it's mixed use.
inquiring minds want to know.
And one thing to know, if you do get an offer accepted and you do not have a seller property disclosure, once you have personal delivery of the seller property disclosure, your buyer can walk away within 3 days for no reason whatsoever. That's
Yeah.
only if you didn't have the seller property disclosure and you had an accepted offer. Doesn't happen very often, but occasionally it does.
And if you write in the offer and there isn't one, make it subject to that. It's just a good idea so that everybody knows what's going on. Make the offer subject to that. And then lastly is the sales worksheet. Take a minute and fill it out. As good as our staff is, they cannot read your mind. Well.
No, we cannot.
I cannot.
So take a minute and fill out those things in there that will help us out. Don't just put the buyer's name. Put down some information that you have on that buyer. If you get an earnest money check and it has an address on it, then you have the address for the information on the worksheet. So just help us out a little bit. If they're married, put down that they're married. That has a huge effect because sometimes we'll get things and we'll look at it and it doesn't show anything on the file that's married. The guy, quote, owned the house himself and she doesn't own it, blah, blah, blah. But you put down married because at the bare minimum, she will have to sign the deed for dower rights purposes. That's the minimum that you have to do, is sign the deed to release dower rights. Okay? So the rest, yeah. Social security numbers, yeah, that's hard. Don't request any of that information in email, please. Okay? If it's proprietary information, please, text is better. Phone call is even better. do not request information in an email that is personal information about a buyer or seller or yourself. Don't ever. And if we have a staff person that does that, please let me know because they've just been ill-informed. I think that's pretty much it. Questions? Is there something that you wondered about that we didn't cover? I know it's quick and there's lots and lots and lots of details. But take the time to read the paperwork. Read yours first. Make sure you know yours inside out, upside down. You need to know what it says. If you know what all the print stuff says, it makes filling in the blanks really, really easy.
And septic has the same exemptions as,
It does. Okay.
Yeah.
So family transfers. And
yeah, you made me think, oh my God, I say that all the time.
Thank you. I have to look every time because there's so many different things.
You never do them. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so rare.
Right. You know.
Well, I want to say a really big thank you to Lance for coming and walking you through all of this. It was helpful for me too, because these are newer forms for me, having looked at other forms. So I'm very aware of all of the differences in them.
Good
So
job, Lance.
if there's any questions, always
Yes. feel
reach
free.
out. We're
Call
happy
me.
to help.
I'm available pretty much all the time. I have.
Lance is who I call when I get myself into real.
Yeah. When all else fails, it's like, Lance, I'm like,
This be
I
better for
have
Shane
you.
or Lance. Oh,
Shit.
shit.
I'm in a pickle.
I'm really deep. I gotta call Lance. Right? No, and we always figure something out.
Yeah.
We always figure something
All
out.
right.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Whew,
We were very close.
within minutes.
And it still never cooled down in here, ever.
No, it didn't.
It's set for like 67 out there, but it says,
It just,
yeah.
we
I
just,
don't even hear it kicking on.
yeah, we just need we literally do. We need a ceiling fan up there, so we just turn it over. Because that's what happens is, there's that little tiny door, and there's no way to get airflow.
Oh, you were comfortable?
I don't think it's that cold. Everybody else.
I know. I like cold. I like it cold.
I still haven't turned on my furnace.
Oh,
I did two mornings, today and yesterday. I clicked it on at the beginning of the day so that Donna would figure it out. So I go upstairs and turn it on, take the chill off.
Yeah, I mean, we popped on just our fireplace last night for about an hour.
Oh, yeah, we did
And that
that.
was enough for us to just kick it out. Uh-oh.
Okay,
Subject to sale.
yes.
Okay, what do you say about the seller?
I have one, but
Give them 24 hours notice or whatever, I always put 24 hours.
Mhm.
notice 'cause I'm selling it, you didn't want that. So the buyer doesn't have that 24 hours to get financing? I mean, I
They
usually.
have they can get financing, yes, but not to sell the property.
It didn't look.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So if they got 24 hours, then you can get a letter from a lender that says we can perform. Yeah, absolutely.
I got to check my always trying to do that.
Okay.
It's the best.
No
It's
problem.
best that you get it all out
It's
front.
super,
So say the.
survey.
I think I've done one before, I like it, and it's not like it's gonna be
Once you're
a lot of
notified, the
questions,
seller
like, are
notifies
you
you.
interested in this?
and the
What
offer doesn't matter.
days work best?
You gotta show.
I think that's kind of all I'm gonna ask.
Yeah.
Just start there.
It's tough, but
Well, credit union or like programs. Credit union,
most people
mortgage
think that.
person.
And I had one agent tell me, so, well, I don't care, I'm gonna give you 24 hours to sell their property. And I'm like, that's gonna be great until they get an offer on their property and you say, okay, we're gonna go with them because they were the first offer and blah, blah, blah. And so you do that and you advise your people that you can do that, and then their deal falls apart. And the seller's mad, and they're mad because they had the seller offer, but you thought that first one was the best thing to do. And now you stuck your foot right in the, you know.
Okay, but once you give it to the seller, so you make the decision.
That's exactly, well, but that's the deal, is that it says, you know, if you don't want that to read that way, you have to change it at the beginning, not.
Okay, I've got
If you say, I want the buyer, I want the buyer to like, either they have 24 hours, either prove that they can offer, or
You wanna add that in there?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
We can do that.
I don't care about
Call
that,
me in a minute.
but don't come after the fact and go, this is how I'm gonna interpret it, and I'm like, you don't get to, you're not an attorney. This is what it says, so either live